All right, so PDH course number 2 for Ngigma, personal introductions. So hi everyone, I'm Kyle Young. My background is transportation engineering. 3 years ago, I switched over to electric utilities and project management. So this course is inspired by the intersection of those two items into transportation engineering that is handy when you're doing utilities.
And I guess are you good?
Yep, I'm good. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
So I'm Joel Bice. I'm a construction management major who is working on finalizing his PE. And I have worked in heavy highway, underground utility, substation, and overhead electric utility construction. And kind of in a similar manner, I've dealt a lot with and had a lot of intersections with traffic control. And again, going back, this course was going to focus specifically more towards my current job, which is utilities engineering. And that's kind of, I mean, really my big overall intro there.
Sounds good. So housekeeping stuff. In order to, at least in the state of South Dakota, be eligible for PDH, there is going to be a quiz on our website, ngigma.com, link in the description. Also, check it out. We are setting up a marketplace for you to sell your services as a subcontractor or a subconsultant to other consultants, hopefully to enable additional moonlighting or bridge the gap from going out on your own to where you have steady work from your clients.
Tell your friends about the free PDH. Come for the free PDH. Stick around for the other stuff if you're interested. If it works for you, it might not work for everybody, and that's okay too. Still take the free PDH, guys.
Absolutely, it's our favorite word. And the great thing is there's one main manual that this course is over, and it is free also. So let's see, applicability of this course. So there's going to be a quiz. I am a licensed PE in South Dakota, so that's covered. So this course, if you're a transportation engineer and you're a professional engineer, this course probably is going to be the most boring thing you've watched. So put it on your other monitor while you work, turn the volume down, go take the test, print off a certificate. Everybody else actually pay attention. It should be useful.
Yeah, and just, yeah, like Kyle said, a lot of our coursework is talking head stuff. Even if this does apply to you as something that's going to be highly useful, it's still okay to put it on in the background and watch it and listen to it. Most of the information is going to be provided through us going back and forth with one another. And then you're going to have to go back in the links to make sure you brush up on some of the material and just know where those things are and have them handy.
Yeah. So our target audience, utilities. We have a overhead electric perspective. Really any utility that's crossing a road, a street, a highway, it's going to apply to all of that.
I'll throw in, we can throw in a little underground in there too, because that also will apply for traffic control. So
yeah, it just takes longer.
Yeah, and I get to play in that world quite a bit, so
yeah. So yes, it's applicable to all utilities occupying highway right-of-way or any street right-of-way. So the way that my personal practice works right now, normally it is our contractors providing traffic control plans. It ties in closely to means and methods is the reason for that. So most utility engineers won't necessarily be making traffic control plans, but it's still really good to know what is going on. let's see. So
Especially
that
if, oh, I was gonna say, now we're jumping all over each other. I was just gonna throw in there, especially as you're probably going to be engineering oversight for your subcontractors or your consulting engineers, and part of being oversight is being somewhat familiar with what's going on in areas of construction that might not be your specialty.
yes. So normally, so the contractor will put together a traffic control plan. They'll have a subcontractor that owns the signs, and a subcontractor normally knows what they're doing. So they'll put together a plan, run it by your DOT, city, county, whoever owns the road, and then they'll send that on to the contractor, drop off the signs and say, here you go. And that's normally the extent that they're doing. I've seen some involvement in more specialty things, but ultimately then it comes to your contractor whose specialty is not traffic control doing something under your oversight, so you need to keep them honest of what's going on.
Yep.
So other applicability, we are focusing on USA standards because the manual we use, the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, is applicable through most of the US. I think California does something different. So as with most of our videos, it's for the US, except maybe California. You'll have to check if you work on stuff there.
Yep.
All right. So, like I said, Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, it is free. The PDF of it is free from the Federal Highway Administration. Link will be in the description, also on a reference guide that we will put on the same webpage as the quiz. Another handy thing there is the Standard Highway Signs and Markings book. It's not that important for temporary traffic control. It's used mostly for when you have to make your guidance signs. So kind of outside the scope of this course, but still a handy book.
And again, it is free.
Yes.
It is, it will kind of supplement what's going on within your traffic control plan and will help supplement your knowledge when on site. So yes, or working with your subs.
And then another important thing about the MUTCD is that most states have adopted it as part of their highway laws. So when it says to do something, that's legally binding. Except for California, I think they wrote their own. Obviously, you'll have to check with whatever state you're practicing in, but most of the time it's adopted into state law. Okay, so then specific chapters. Our focus is going to be on chapter 6, and that's the temporary traffic control chapter. It has, you can pretty much just print off that pamphlet for your temporary traffic control, and that's what you're going to need. There might be some other general things in there. I think the beginning of the book has how to use this book, and we'll touch on that.
Okay.
Let's see. So other sources, when you cross a road, somebody owns the road. You'll normally pretty easily figure out whose road it is because it'll be a city street. You know, it's a city street. It'll be a county road, and that's going to be pretty obvious, or a state or federal highway, which will be the state DOT.
And just a note there on ownership, I think it's a good thing to note kind of upfront that depending on where you're at, I've had very uniform experiences with state DOT and larger working groups versus municipalities. I've worked more on the end of enacting traffic control plans and maintaining traffic control plans than actually putting them together. And I will say that, like, I can think of a lot of examples of state DOT being very consistent, whereas I've worked in municipalities around the area that can be anywhere from extremely restrictive to, oh, throw some cones up, it'll be fine. So just a good thing to note when you cross roads, especially like for a city or small town, that you may have more issues with that traffic control plan than you would with, let's say, a state crossing, because the state crossing is going to have a very set process to go through.
Yeah. And so one of the nice things is the process is often going to be taken care of by your contractor or their subcontractor. One caveat on that of some places may be very lenient on traffic control. Back to the states adopting the MUTCD as law. Yes. Even if they say, yeah, throw some cones up, you'll be okay, still follow the MUTCD because of, well, if you're watching this for PDHs, you're a professional engineer, it's your job to follow it.
And again, like we try to intersect kind of your engineering meets dealing with contractors in real world situations, and that's kind of where my familiarity comes in with traffic control plans here. So this is just things that you will find in the field is kind of what I'm listing, and Kyle is making sure that you understand, but follow the MUTCD because you have to. It's state law.
Right. And so with the DOTs, as you were saying, there's a lot more consistency. Most of their standard drawings and their standard procedures follow the MUTCD. Some of them, you can look at the standard plate, you can look at one of the typicals in the MUTCD, and it's the same thing with a different drawing style. Other things, it's the MUTC didn't cover this, so they took the same principles and made it to something special. Let's see. So standard details, guidance and interpretation, that's where you'll see some differences with the DOT, is some might interpret something differently. So you're not going to have a lot of conflict there. It's normally going to be you use the more stringent, you'll be fine. Let's see. So then working in the right of way and some other general items. First thing was, how do you use this book? And I will share my screen here.
Okay.
I'll find an example where it gives a bunch of guidance. All right, here's a good. All right, so you see here, they have.
There we go.
There. Vicinity of a grade crossing. And so this is a little different. I don't see this application here a lot, but it's a good example for what I want to show here, where the standard, here's the standard. This is stuff you have to do. It says this becomes law. The support is more information for you, or things of, if you can follow it, it's best practice. And that's pretty much how you use the book. There's more information in the front part of it. There's some good tables. I have some diagrams cut out of here. This is bread and butter for transportation engineers for taper lengths.
And just something of note that I think is good to remind ourselves of when going through this is that especially with road closure standards, a lot of this is definitely kind of the classic written in blood standards. These don't exist because motorists can be trusted to be safe during lane closures when you're building on a right of way. Just again, something to remind yourselves of, that pretty much this whole thing is written because something happened, and to be aware of, if you're following these standards, there's a reason that they are set up the way they are. And it's not much like electrical clearances, which I'm a lot more familiar with. They don't write them because somebody didn't violate them.
Yes. And as far as the importance of this, the public are idiots.
You said it, not me.
Some of the stuff I've seen where somebody had to get out and move barricades to just barely squeak by them to come up to where we had a section of road cut out, and then start complaining that, oh, you should have had the road blocked off. The public are idiots.
Yes, I had a downtown project in a local municipality that had, now, and this is where again, as the project manager, had I been the lead manager on this project, I could have identified problems with the traffic control plan early on, but I was not. I was brought on later on, and we had a dynamic traffic control plan, which means that every day we were encountering angry motorists because, oh, hey, the traffic control plan has changed from the day before because we're doing work across these 4 lanes. Now, normally this isn't a big deal, but unfortunately, all of the work being done was adjacent to the primary parking structure for the entire working district of that downtown area. So every day about 7:30, I think I only had 2 of my my traffic control flaggers nearly get run over the whole time I was there, but I had multiple people who had close calls as well. So again, just kind of getting back to that, of the public are idiots, but a poorly written traffic control plan can compound the situation quite well.
It really can. And to bring it a little more serious, maybe, I know of 2 fatalities that have happened on projects that I've designed. They weren't the result of traffic control plan errors, but they still happened. There's been other bad incidents that have happened. Actually, on one of the projects that had a fatality, there was also kind of a pile up at a flagger queue in one spot. Somebody wasn't paying attention, ran into the back of the queue of cars at a flagger station. So while some of our stories are humorous, some are quite serious.
And again, this is a serious, I think a lot of people I've seen a tendency in industry to discount traffic control being something that needs thorough review or needs a lot of attention from the, let's say in this case, our main focus is the utilities engineer, or the engineer, the lead engineer from an owner's perspective. And that's not the case. I would actually say it's an often ignored item that really can affect the overall safety of your projects, which I think is something that, as engineers, you always, or when working with engineers, it's always something that you try to emphasize, but it's sometimes areas like these that you tend to discount where you have the most risk.
Yeah, that's for sure. A lot of times it's you try to get the plans out and it's not a big dollar item. So oh yeah, we can bid it and throw this together at the last minute. So
yeah,
that's for sure. Let's see. Oh, another big item. Only keep applicable signs showing. This is
yes.
in the manual. The reference is section 6B.01, standard 09. Back to the point of the motoring public are idiots. If you have a sign up and they don't see what the sign warns them about, they will ignore that sign the next time they're through your project.
Yes. And not just the motoring public are idiots. I think something else that a personal observation is, I think the motoring public is also still out of practice in the motoring portion due to, you know, recent conditions in the US at least. So yeah, they're getting back into the swing, but I still see more poor decision making and more questionable driving on a daily basis than I did, we'll say, pre-COVID.
Sure, certainly.
Yeah. So again, just something else to be aware of is this is a life-saving thing, or can be a life-saving thing if executed properly, for a lot of different reasons.
That's for sure. So then the manual talks about there being 4 different areas. You have the advanced warning, which takes up the most space. Then you have the transition, which we saw that equation just a little bit ago. Basically, your taper length. This is where a lot of accidents happen, and the source of a lot of road rage. And this is not, I'm not going to get into the debate of zipper merge or get in your lane. I don't know the answer to that, but this is where that happens.
Yes, this is where the road rage happens. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you have your activity area. That's where you are working on stuff. Some of the guidance in there actually does rely on engineering judgment of how much buffer do you need between the end of your transition and where you start the work. Some work areas that have a lot of activity for a long time in a smaller space, you'll start to see concrete barriers. So bridges, bridge approaches, landslide repair. If you are trenching into that roadway, probably start looking at concrete barriers there. Protect your workers, protect the public. And then after that, the termination, which on a lot of interstate projects in South Dakota, is kind of non-existent. It's where you end your cones, you have your end roadwork sign, you have a speed limit sign to resume your speed, and normally it's pretty good. That's normally the part, though, I also see left off of the, well, the cones are gone, okay.
Yeah, and I think something to be really cognizant of in your own projects is knowing the speed, the average, the posted speed limit of the roadway. I think something that isn't discussed a lot, but is a real concern, is the actual normal operating speed of that roadway. You know, there are roadways that are listed at 35 where everyone goes 35. There are roadways listed at 35 where everyone drives 40 to 50 miles an hour, or, you know, 10 to 15 miles over the speed limit. You know, being aware of some of those little local conditions is important, especially, you know, the early warning is especially important. Something you see in a lot of traffic control plans in our areas are pre-warnings. So you'll actually see informational signs go up saying that, hey, construction is going to initiate on this date at this location. Be aware that there will be lane closures on this road on this date. Again, just some really good general things that we see a lot of around here that I think are good tools. I think the other thing is be very cognizant of how they're showing flagging and flaggers, your actual people on the ground. Because again, this is drawing on my own experiences. In places I've worked, we've had a couple of fatalities. The highest fatality count by position was always roadway flagger. Again, there's a lot of reasons for this. Not all of it falls on the traffic engineer, but if you can create a safe work zone for that particular person, you're doing a lot for the safety of your project. I think the big thing that I see is sometimes placing flaggers on what I consider to be the wrong side of the transition. So you can place your flagger opposite of your transition, and generally speaking, they're going to be in less danger and have more room to escape than if they're actually standing in your transition area. I think that's a good example of just a working item that, hey, like, if it says put them here, you can just suggest they move them over here. And again, it's going to depend on the roadway and the location. This is where engineering judgment comes in. The whole idea being, if you have a live person in that roadway, they need to be in a position where they're either safe where they're standing or have a way to get out of the way of incoming traffic.
Yeah, for sure. So part of that too is transition lanes, advanced warning signs. There's calculated distances. There's room for adjustment. Normally you can lengthen them. So transitions, if you lengthen it based on sight distance, definitely a good idea to come and take a look at your project before you're doing work on it. And even applying judgment of, you come up to your project and something's not looking right, have it changed. If you can't see a sign until you're right up on somebody, move the sign back. If you come over the hill and that's where your transition starts, move your transition back. You can have more buffer space between your transition and your work area. Something else as far as flaggers, a lot of times I've seen where, I don't anticipate this on a lot of utility crossing work, but you'll have a flagger sign somewhere around that transition area, and then a flagger is in an urban area for the times that an excavator might be encroaching on a lane or something like that. So it's an intermittent flagger, and that's a place where motorists will have a hard time knowing what to expect.
So, and I can give you a good example is like, okay, when I worked for utility contractors and we were stringing wire, we would often have temporary short-term closures as we were setting that wire over that roadway and as we were clipping it into its final locations. So there's short closures they aim for them to not be during high traffic times of day, but they can get extended when things go wrong. And that's an area where you're not bringing traffic to a halt, or you are bringing traffic to a halt. You're not just closing a lane. Again, if you've ever seen the material we're working with, and you know what would happen if it were to drop on top of a vehicle, well, there wouldn't be a vehicle anymore, really. I mean, not in a working sense. So that's why they do it. It's really common on like small and on rural highways. I can't say that word. For that to happen. But again, just something to be aware of, as far as like, that's probably the most common location I've seen flaggers for utilities and utility projects. That and underground work where they're tearing up the roadway, putting in new underground pipe, is just like any other underground work. The main thing you're going to want to be aware of is what the road surfacing is and what kind of time frame you're looking at to get that work finished, and what kind of equipment you need to get that surfacing off. Because, certain types of hand tools or powered tools versus a concrete chop saw have very different space requirements. So again, just making sure that that's all kind of captured on that traffic control plan.
Talked about some lane closures. Really, we discussed really what was needed. There's some stuff for work on shoulders. If you're on the shoulder, you still need traffic control. If you're in the right of way and off the roadway, you need traffic control. And it's just as simple as you have beacons on your vehicles, you have a roadwork ahead sign, you have your end roadwork sign. Work on a shoulder, there's shoulder closure layouts, lane closures, that's where you get into the tapers and stuff. That will be in the reference material as well. And then temporary road closures, I think, is actually probably the most interesting thing. And for an overhead power perspective, it's definitely what we need. It's what we always end up with.
Yep.
And so there's some interesting stuff on there. A couple notes I had is you need to know your duration and work with the road owner for that exact schedule of, okay, I need 15 minutes during daylight on this day. And so I had one where we shut down a major interstate. We worked with the local DOT. They pulled hourly traffic data to find the best time to do it. We looked at how high is the sun in the sky at that time.
I'm sure.
You consider a lot of things. And so what we ended up with is we got assistance from Highway Patrol to do a rolling stop. So we had that flagger set up at the road closure, but because of the volume of traffic, we did a rolling stop where we got assistance from the Highway Patrol. Our traffic subconsultant had advanced warning vehicles where during the stop, they were on the shoulder and threw it in reverse and were backing up the traffic queue or away from the traffic queue to provide advance warning as it was needed in the right spot. It was quite a production, and it went smoothly. So there's times that you do some creative stuff that is well beyond what the MUTCD says. MUTCD says, put these signs in and have a flagger.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say that's also my experience. Usually temporary road closures are what you're going to see from a utility. It is the most interesting it can be the most interesting. I've also seen as simple as basically quickly dropped barriers, put flaggers in place, pulled it across the highway, got everything secured on both crossing structures, opened it back up. Again, as Kyle said, it's really a lot of, there is an element of being able to read the traffic situation and knowing how much effort needs to be put into that closure. When we've done those kind of quick and dirty closures, in my experience, it's small rural highways in parts of the world where you might stop 5 vehicles during your 15 to 30-minute window. Versus, I'm sure when they closed the interstate, there was a queue.
Yeah, it was probably miles of traffic going slowly.
Yes.
And then you end up with the weird shockwave traffic theories. And if you ever watch a time-lapse video on that, that's interesting. That might have to go in the bucket, but
I like we'll throw it in the bucket.
In the bucket. So yeah, there's definitely a lot that goes into it. The great thing is the road owner will generally help you out, or they'll make sure it's done right.
Yeah.
It may not always feel like help, but it is. So
it just goes right back to the serious part of the conversation of motorists are stupid and dangerous because and you don't want to have to deal with problems that come from that. And so the road owner wants to help you not have to deal with those problems, and that's a good thing.
Right. And a lot of times, I mean, it's government, and
yeah,
sometimes employees with the government are very helpful, and sometimes they're not. And that's where it's good to know what the source material is here, to maybe crack open the MUTCD when you're putting together the submittals, or passing the submittals from your contractor over to your government entity of, am I handing them something stupid or not? And if you actually take a look at it and have, okay, this is passable, they're probably more inclined to help you also.
And it's normal with those kind of agencies. If everyone's aware of the rules, they generally play nice. And these are generalizations. This is not an every time sort of thing, but they feel more secure in what you're putting together if they think that you've looked at the MUTCD, if they think that you have experience with traffic control plans, or at least if you don't have experience, at least you're asking the right questions and looking at the right source material. So yeah.
And then, so the next item I have here is when you need a longer road closure and you're able to do detours. So putting together a detour plan is kind of painful sometimes, but it's also really nice for executing your project. And the reason being, say you're trenching something in, I mean, for just pulling a line across the road, probably don't need to do detours. If you are putting a pipe across the road, then a detour is going to be really nice, because otherwise you're going to have to close up your trench and get the surface ready for traffic in the same day before you move on to your next one, or before you can leave the site. So you're either leaving a flagger overnight with a lighted station, or, well, I guess you'd have 2 flaggers, or setting up temporary traffic signals. In the right situations, detours are really helpful.
And this, I think, is one area that we should mention where municipalities and local, especially if you're working inside of a town, for lack of a better term, local politics can come into play here. we have one local municipality we work with a lot. They're not painful for us, but I worked with them in a previous life. And when it comes to long-term items, they're incredibly painful because they want no road closures. Now, this is just kind of a note on those long closures or detours. There's some places that are going to fight tooth and nail to not allow those kind of closures, or if they do, it's going to be almost a hybrid closure approach of, oh yeah, you can close this off, but you have to keep these portions open. Just be aware that long-term closures and detours can become very, very emotionally driven when it comes to the people who are affected by them. And you may not be able to get the exact long-term closure or detour that works for you because of that.
Yes. That's there's a lot of barriers in the way of being able to get what you need sometimes.
Yes.
Go
ahead, Kyle.
If you have multi-lane roads, the good thing is you can work around that. I think the trickiest really would be your rural highways.
Yeah.
And so Western South Dakota, a lot of times there's no options for detours, or the detour is 100 miles. So that's limiting. But most of the country, though, they might have section roads. And so your state highway, your federal highway might not be able to get long-term closure and detour. But since we're talking about long linear projects, most of those roads you'll be able to set up detours, and at most you're putting people a half a mile out of their way of where you basically have a point closure. So it's worth covering. Good luck.
Yeah, again, just something to be aware of if you have to approach one for whatever reason. Let's say I think a good example and something we're seeing more in utilities are requests for underground transmission. And I think a good use case against underground transmission is to properly install high voltage underground banks across like rural highways and things of that nature. Are likely going to require those sort of long-term traffic detour / long-term closures. And I think that should be part of every routing study that's done for an underground line, is understanding the crossings and how those can be executed. And again, hey, do we try to close this road down to do it, or do we try to go under the road effectively? Like I said, I think it's part of coming from the underground side that I see that especially people in the central US don't have a lot of understanding of when it comes to installing utilities.
Yeah. And honestly, we could probably do a whole nother hour on underground trenching across highways.
Yeah.
Of the limitations of to have safe excavation and leave a traffic lane open is really not feasible. I guess one thing on that is there are diversions, and you may need to get extra right-of-way for a temporary diversion around a cut. I see it around here a lot for culvert installations. So South Dakota, a lot of times, because detours are 100 miles, roads will stay open on subgrade for full-out road regrading projects, and they will use diversions for structure replacement and for culvert installation. I would say that's in this category also. The MUTCD does have a standard layout for the signing to do that. The design of the traffic diversion gets kind of interesting also.
Yeah, and I'll throw in another interesting diversion that we've seen around here, which are small mountain highways. Especially when bridge work is being done, we'll often go to single one-way bridges with traffic control, usually automated traffic control. Whereas it'll be basically they have a stop direction and a go direction, and then a transitory period, and then okay, now the other direction gets to go. They've been very successful with that here. But like I said, another good example of a novel situation that we find a lot of novel situations locally, so it's a good one to bring up.
Yeah, one nice thing about those is the direction indicator on the backside of those, so your workers can tell which way the traffic's supposed to be coming from. Although I look both ways at one-way streets because I have that much confidence in the public.
I've driven the wrong way down one-way streets, so that's how much confidence you should have in the public.
I don't think I've done that. I've seen it. I've seen it twice in the last 2 months, though. So
I have not done it since I was about 18 years old, but I cannot claim that I have never done it. I've never done it in the town that I live in either.
Yeah, that's the case. There's once I was downtown Sioux Falls, and I remember they had Iowa license plates. Probably doesn't matter one way or another, but they did. And they come the wrong way on a street to an intersection, cars all the way across the oncoming lanes at a red light. And so they end up pulling up onto the sidewalk. They go up the curb ramp and park on the sidewalk. I think they were done for the day.
It's okay to be done when that happens. But again,
yeah,
going back to it, there are some novel solutions for difficult situations. Usually what you'll get from the road owner is what they've done before. And I would say that your job is to review it, see if you think it's appropriate for your use case, and then approve it or look for other novel solutions. You know, there's a lot of ways to. A great example that I've always used is with our overhead construction. There's about 900 correct ways. There's 1,000 ways to do it. 900 of them are correct in that they will deliver power safely. I think traffic control is very similar in that it can be safely executed a lot of different ways. Sometimes it comes down to local preference or what the people who are there are used to seeing. And again, a lot of this is, use your engineer brain, but at the same time, take that advice from the road owners and your traffic control people. And I'm going to say that you should be all right.
Yeah, I would say so too. And normally the road owner, the person you'll be dealing with, has seen what happens when it's done wrong before. So you know the wrong way to do it as well as the right way.
Yes.
They've probably done it the wrong way. And so, yeah, they know the right way. So normally they have pretty decent judgment. And if you end up with junior engineer Skippy, that's okay. Try to get to the next level. Normally, the good thing is the experienced person normally is the one listed on the website. So call them first because that's the contact information. They'll switch you over to junior engineer Skippy If something's not going right, go back to that first person. Let's see. So we have one more item on the agenda here. I think we're doing about right on time.
Oh, good.
So the other consideration is pedestrian traffic control. This is a pain because you normally don't think about it until somebody makes you, but I have in my notes, it's kind of required under federal law, under the ADA. So it's included in ProWAG, and it is included in the MUTCD, and it's included in the parts of the MUTCD that say you shall do it. Also, there's ProWAG. I think it's still not approved after 15 or 20 years, something like that. But generally, the courts have cited where if you're following the latest guidance of public right-of-way accessibility guidelines, that's what ProWAG stands for.
I was going to harass you about that.
If you're following that, you're in compliance with ADA, pretty much. The Americans with Disabilities Act. So it's kind of required under federal law. It's the right thing to do because I've seen utilities, normally distribution level utilities, be horrible about this. Of you're walking along, sidewalk's out, there's a cone here. And it's often done wrong, both in urban settings. I live in suburbia, so I've seen it done wrong in suburbia plenty of times. And it doesn't actually make a distinction of, oh, well, it only applies to, big urban reconstructions. It applies to everything. If there's a sidewalk, you need to do pedestrian traffic controls. Because really, it's a pain. You don't want anybody to. Nobody likes having the old guy that worked in some entirely unrelated industry, but he's retired and has nothing better to do to come and start talking about your project.
And if you don't route him around your project, he's going to get stopped there.
He's going to get there. He might be angry, but he's going to suck a lot of your time. And you could be doing something much more productive than talking to that guy.
Yep. And again, I'm going to go back to it. It's also the right thing to do. There's a lot of interesting requirements for it, as far as, you need to provide an accessible detour, you need detectable barriers, protection for pedestrians. It's all in the MUTCD in Chapter 6D.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that I'll mention here along with that is every place you work will have two kinds of pedestrian traffic. They will have like sidewalks and what I would call like directed pedestrian traffic. And then there will be pedestrian traffic that happens along natural pathways. And while the protections or the requirements under law through ProWAG are not as explicit, it is, again, we're going back to, it's kind of the right thing to do. It is a risk on your project to have an uncontrolled pedestrian crossing, even if it's not what you would normally consider like a sidewalk or a pedestrian walkway. I think a good example is right here where we're at. We have train tracks. A lot of people walk the train tracks. You already have to do stuff in relation to providing a lot of leeway for the railroad companies, but you should also be aware, if you're working through those areas, to provide something for the pedestrians that will be walking along those train tracks. Even if it's just a detour sign that points them at the actual sidewalk.
Yeah.
It's that's usually how I've seen it done, is generally speaking, they detour those pathways to the nearest actual legitimate pedestrian walkway. It usually works pretty well. I've never had any issues with it. And, you know, like, generally speaking, the folks who are walking the train tracks are not wearing suits and ties, and they're still pretty good about, oh, hey, there's a detour. I'm probably not going to cross there where they tell me not to cross. About 9 times out of 10 they do, which is about the same number of times as people with suits and ties walking down the street. So that's kind of the way I look at it. Is, again, you might need a couple extra detour signs. You might find that's those kind of items out a week into the project. You notice, oh, hey, people keep walking across our project right here. We should probably put some signs up.
Yeah.
So again, be willing, especially with pedestrian traffic, to modify that plan after, you know, subjecting it to pedestrians, because sometimes, again, I don't think they're not as dangerous to the people working for you, but it is dangerous for them to be on your project.
Yeah, and that may be your problem.
Yes. So again, different kind of risk than people in motorized vehicles, but still one you may have to address, and you may need to do some adjusting on the fly to make it work.
Yeah. Something I've seen also is maps. You can print out handouts that you put in a real estate house for sale box sort of thing at your, hey, sidewalk's closed. They can pull a map and they can see where are they going, where's the detour taking them. Because honestly, you don't really want to walk a mile out of your way to find out that the detour isn't where you wanted to go. Other people don't want to either.
Yep.
So you have detour signs, but you aren't really showing where they're going. It's just here's a detour around the project.
And that, I'll also say, I've experienced this with actual traffic control plans in a vehicle as well. Sometimes they tell you, like, I've also seen, so be aware of that too, of, okay, recently, small town doing a main street reconstruction, which the main street is also the highway. And, oh, hey, they're going to detour us around this. And they detoured us around it to a frontage road that doesn't connect to the highway for like 15 miles. We needed to be back at the highway where it tees off into another highway like a mile outside of town. So again, one of those things, like, if you're providing signage for a detour, be aware of what's the most likely route people are trying to get to. Because
that reminds me of a story I heard at the DOT, and that was region traffic engineer was going about his job, guide signs, all of that stuff. So it wasn't just temporary, it was permanent. So he's like, yeah, that's not enough information. And they argued about it. And so the channel threw the gauntlet down. Have your wife drive out here and find this. The signing got changed, is what I heard.
Well, you know.
And that's not a knock on anybody's wife. It's nothing about gender. It's take somebody unfamiliar that you trust, and they might not be able to find their way through something.
Yep. And again, that's kind of what we're getting at, is it's a wonderful test of your traffic control plan to subject it to someone who doesn't know anything about it. And again, just there, a lot of this tends to be a little more soft than a lot of other engineering disciplines, mainly because there's oftentimes especially when it comes to closures and how road owners will want things to be done. I think there's a lot more, well, this is how we've always done it, or, well, we can't close down this because we can't, for whoever's business, or because I use this road to get home, or whatever other reason, whatever justification they will come up with. So it's soft because there's a lot of people involved when you're dealing with roadways, not just your project team.
Yeah. No, the fun thing about some of the soft reasons, they might not actually tell you the real reason. Oh yeah, that's like me at home. I'm not doing that. You'll get something else, and normally it won't make much more sense. So yeah, there's plenty of challenges. I can't think of a lot of tips of how to get there, other than whatever influence you can find, and be persuasive.
Yeah. I mean, you again, follow the MUTCD. It's pretty well outlined exactly what you need to do. A lot of what we're covering here are just one, some anecdote and projects we've worked on, and two, that while it is a good guideline, there are almost always novel situations when it comes to actually applying those guidelines. So just be aware that the tool is out there, but be prepared to be somewhat flexible on making sure that you're correctly utilizing it, and that the actual rules are being followed, but at the same time, you're being flexible and making sure that your project is also going to get carried out, and your traffic control plan is going to be approved by whoever that approving body is. Which is again why I go back to, like, DOTs are easy to work with because they've got a process. They do it a lot. They know what they want. They will almost universally tell you exactly what they want, and it makes it easier to handle.
Yeah. And a lot of times they have specific drawings of, this is what I want. I want center plate 654. I actually don't remember the number for the traffic control plates, but they have center plates, standard drawing, and it's we're going to do this. Okay, use this center plate. There you go.
And 9 times out of 10, other road owners, be they county or city, if you hey, we're going to use the DOT standard plates. Oh, okay, yeah, go for it. That's a pretty common accepted standard in a lot of cases, until you start getting into some either larger cities or towns that have other yeah, we have a lot of tourist towns out here. So again, that's something that comes up a lot in road control plans. Would be, what's the main purpose of the town? If you're working with an ag town and you're going to shut down the road to the silo, they're not going to want you to do that for very long, or during certain times of year. So again, just going back to kind of, if you know your area, you should know when those blackout dates for road closures are going to be. You should kind of understand the region. And even if you don't, if you call up the people who own it, they'll tell you.
Yeah, Black Hills, you're not going to shut it down at the beginning of August.
No.
Nothing is going to be shut down at the beginning of August.
In fact, everything pretty much has to be done by the beginning of August in most accepted Even if it's not, the accepted documentation says it was going to be.
Yes.
Well,
I think it's pretty good.
yeah, I liked it.
You know what I